set text in the villains option for paper 2, and you can see it comes from the historian Livy, and this is the same historian who wrote the text we looked at last semester about the rape of Lucretia. So Livy is a Roman historian. He is writing towards the end of the 1st century BC, the last quarter of the 1st century BC, roughly between 27 and 9 BC. He is writing during the reign of the Emperor Augustus, the first Roman emperor. And he's writing a book which, as you can see, is called Ab Urbe Condita, from the foundation of Rome. So he wants to go back about 700 years and look at the foundation of Rome and the story of Rome ever since then. So he goes back to the story of Romulus and Remus, and Rome being founded in, according to him, 753 BC. And then he takes the story through the period of the kings up to the end of the monarchy, which, and if you remember, the story, the moment which finishes the monarchy is the story of the rape of Lucretia. That is what triggers the overthrow of the Tarquinii, the Tarquins, and in 509 BC, Rome becomes a republic, a sort of democracy, and that then lasts for a few centuries until 27 BC, when Rome becomes ruled by emperors, of whom Augustus is the first one. So Livy is tracing that history of Rome from monarchy through republic to empire, or to rule by emperors. And the story of the rape of Lucretia came in book 1. As you can see, we are now in book 3. And before I look at any of the Latin, I just want to give you the historical context of where we are in the story. So the monarchy has fallen, right? 509 BC, Rome has become a republic, so no kings, elected politicians instead. And what happens is you get, as you can see here, something which historians call the conflict of the orders. Now, orders basically mean social classes, and ancient Rome had basically 2 social classes. One which were called the plebeians, the common people, and the other group were called the patricians. Now, it's not quite clear how this distinction emerged, but basically you've got the poorer plebeians and the rich patricians. So you've got a conflict between them, where the plebeians want more equality, and that conflict of the orders does eventually lead to some sort of equality between them, or at least the highest level of plebeians achieve a kind of equality. So the situation is, over a long period of time, the plebeians, the poorer group, want a law code, because laws, they think, will be good for their equality, because the laws will apply to rich and poor alike. So the laws will help them to achieve equality with the rich, with the patricians. And it doesn't work for a long time. They want this law code, the rich are resisting that, and eventually it reaches a kind of crisis point. And so you can see what happens in the year 451, all the regular magistracies, all the regular political jobs and offices are suspended, they are cancelled. And what happens is, and by the way, if we're thinking about the dates here, we're talking about roughly 60 years after the overthrow of the monarchy. So the democracy, the republic, has now been going for about 60 years. And okay, so all the regular magistracies, the political jobs, are suspended and they're replaced by what is called, as you can see here, what is called a decemvirate, which Decemvirate. That means a board of, or a council of 10 people, 10 decemvirs. And they have a lot of power. They have the power of consuls, consular power, and their decisions cannot be appealed, right? There is no right of appeal, which in Latin is provocatio. There's no appeal. So this board of 10 have basically infinite power, and their job is to write some laws. And as you can see here, they do in fact write up 10 tables of laws, 10 lots of laws, and the people approve these laws, they vote them in democratically. So that's all going very well. But the laws don't cover everything, so they need to continue this work. So what happens is, as you can see here, in 450 BC, they are replaced by a second, very similar, elected council of 10, decemvirate, which is made up of 6 patricians, right, 6 men from the richer class, and 4 plebeians, 4 men from the poorer class. And this second decemvirate write 2 more tables of law. The problem is, this decemvirate are supposed to write the laws and then, after a year, resign. They're supposed to finish. They're supposed to leave office. And the problem is, they become increasingly tyrannical. They don't want to give up their power. So they rule not for 1 year, but for 2 years. Right? They're refusing to give up. And this is the context of our story. So what you have is that one of the decemvirs is a man called Claudius. He was actually in the first decemvirate as well. He was in the first council and then elected into the second council as well. And he tries to steal, kidnap, seize a young plebeian woman called Virginia. And that is what leads to the overthrow of the tyrannical decemvirate. And of course, this story is very similar to the story of Lucretia. Right? In both cases, you have a young woman, Lucretia in the old story, Virginia in this story. In both cases, they experience some kind of humiliation or trauma, and in both cases that leads to the overthrow of the current political system. The rape of Lucretia results in the end of the monarchy, and this story about Virginia culminates in the overthrow of the decemvirate. We'll talk more about that later. You can see down here it results in the members of the second decemvirate committing suicide in some cases, and going into exile in other cases. So a very similar story to the Lucretia story. And remember, this option, this group of texts, is called villains by the IB, and the villain here is this man Appius Claudius, who wants to steal Virginia. So that's the kind of general context that we are in. Right, we're in the Roman Republic. We have this council of 10 men ruling the Republic, and we have one of them, Appius Claudius, doing something very bad. Right? That's the context. So let's start then here in chapter 44. So it begins here, sequitur aliud in urbe nefas ablebidine ortum. Okay, so sequitur is the main verb, right? This is the deponent verb sequor, meaning to follow. So there follows, right? Something follows. And the subject of sequitur is aliud nephas. Now, aliud means another, and a nephas means an outrage, something terrible, a disgrace, a horrible deed. It means something contrary to the will of the gods. Okay, so another outrage follows sequitur in urbe, in the city. And this nephas, this outrage, is described as ortum, that means literally risen or sprung from the verb orior, to spring up or rise up. It's a perfect participle from the deponent verb, sprung up ab libidine, from lust. Ab plus ablative. Okay. Just before I go on, two things to notice there. One is that when Livy says another, he means in addition to the Lucretia story. Right? So as well as the Lucretia story, we now have another sort of sexual outrage. And the other thing to notice, by the way, about urbe, right? This word urbe means a city, but specifically it is referring to Rome. And that's why I put city with a capital C in my translation. This is not just any city, this is referring to Rome specifically. Okay, so another outrage follows in the city, sprung from lust, with a consequence, eventu, ablative case. Right? Eventus in Latin means outcome or consequence. So with a consequence, no less foul. So haud means not at all, minus means less, and foidus is an adjective that means foul or horrible or evil or nasty. And it's ablative agreeing with eventu. So with a consequence, no less foul than, quam, than, the one which, quod, the one which, the nephas which, the outrage which, which per, through the stuprum caedemque Lucretiae, through the rape and murder of Lucretia. And then the main verb is here, had expelled, expulerat, had expelled, the Tarquinies, the object is Tarquinios, the Tarquinii or the Tarquins, from the city, urbe, and it's ablative because they're being expelled from the city, so from the city and from the regnum, from the rule or power or throne, something like that. Okay. So Livy's point is that the story he's about to tell, the story of Virginia, is just as bad as the story of Lucretia, and he's saying that, well, yes, it was no less bad. So he's trying to sort of advertise his story, right? He's saying if you thought that was bad, this is going to be just as horrifying. So he's trying to encourage his readers to carry on reading the story. And then we have this word ut here. This is ut in the sense of a result clause. So with the result that, so that, not only, non solum, not only was there, esset, not only was there the same end, idem finis, not only was there the same end for the decemvirs, decemviris, dative plural, for the decemvirs, qui, which, the same, and that's referring back to finis, the same end which, and then we have to take esset again, which there was for the kings, regibus, dative plural. Not only was there the same end for the decemvirs which there had been for the kings, but, said, and now we have to take esset again, there was etiam, there was even, the eadem causa, the same cause, of power, imperii, of power to be lost, amittendi. Amittere means to lose something. There was the same cause of their losing power, something like that. So Livy is drawing a comparison between the Lucretia story and this story about Virginia, right? And he is saying, firstly, the same thing happens to the bad guys, right? Just like the Tarquins were expelled from Rome, so in this story the Decemvirs will be expelled from Rome. And also the cause is the same, because the cause is lust, right? You had in the previous story, you had the lust of Sextus Tarquinius for Lucretia. In this story, you have the lust of Appius Claudius for Virginia. Okay, so, and then Livy now launches into the story. So he says, lust, libido, right? Libido is the subject of this sentence. Lust. What kind of lust? Well, lust of raping, stuprandi, that's the genitive of the verbal noun, the general, lust of raping a virginis plebei, a plebeian woman, a plebeian maiden. Virgo doesn't mean a virgin in the modern sense, it means a young woman, an unmarried woman. So lust of raping a plebeian woman, seized, capit, captured, and then the object is Appius Claudius. Now, a couple of things to note about this. You might be thinking, surely the young woman is the object of the verb stuprandi, so it should be accusative. It's actually genitive. This is something which is called gerundive attraction. Basically, the phrase virginis plebei has been attracted into the same case as stuprandi. We can talk about that gerundive attraction if you want, but the point is it's a unit, right? Lust of raping a plebeian maiden. It all goes into the genitive case. Another thing to think about is the point that if we're looking at this from in a kind of feminist interpretation, you might notice that the subject of the sentence is not the man, but the lust. So there is a sense in which Livy seems to be blaming this crime on the lust, the emotion or something, rather than the man himself, Appius Claudius. A third thing that I've put a little note about here, which is not super important, but is interesting just to note, is that originally, in the earlier versions of this story, Virginia was actually a patrician. She was from a rich family. But Livy has made her a plebeian. And I guess that makes the story a little bit more interesting and exciting. So this isn't just a sort of male-female clash. This is also a rich-poor clash. You know, nasty rich man abusing and taking advantage of innocent poor woman. So Livy's added that in as well. So that's that sentence. Then, moving on, pater virginis, the father of the maiden, Lucius Virginius, was leading, ducebat, an honestum ordinem. Now, honestus means sort of honourable or respectable, and ordinem here means something like a company, in other words, a military regiment or something. And so he's leading part of the Roman army. In Algido, on Algidus. Okay, now Algidus is the eastern part of what the Romans called the Albanus Mons, and which Italians now call Monte Cavo. It is southeast of Rome near Frascati. So the point is, nice, honourable dad is off fighting for Rome, and while he's away, something terrible is going to happen to his daughter. So Livy wants us to sympathise with the honourable father and the innocent daughter. And just as a bit of context, this place, Algidus, the eastern bit of Monte Cavo, was a place where the Romans were in a conflict with an Italian tribe called the Aequi, Aequi. So that's what he's doing. And so yes, notice that word honestum, right? He's doing a good thing. He's leading a respectable company for Rome, while Appius Claudius is scheming against his daughter back home. And then we hear a bit more about Lucius Virginius, right? So he was leading a respectable company on Algidus, a man, vir, of exempli recti. Now, recti means literally straight, straight in the sense of straight down the line, moral, upright. And exemplum means example, or perhaps character. He's literally a man of straight example, a man of upright character, a good man. Both domi, that's a locative form meaning at home, and militii, on campaign, or with the army. So his home life, his personal life is, morally good, and so is his professional life with the military. So he's an all-round good guy. And now, perinde, this word perinde means in the same way. Okay, so his wife, uxor, she's the subject, his wife had been educated or had been raised, pluperfect passive, instituta fuerat. His wife had been raised in the same way, right, in a morally virtuous way. And his children, liberique, were being raised. Instituebantur, imperfect passive, were being raised. And then we can imagine perinde again. So his wife had been raised in the same way, and his children were being raised in that way. So they're all a very nice, good family. This, by the way, the liberi, this is a little bit weird. It's plural, children, and that's pretty strange because actually Virginia is an only child. And commentaries on this text are not very sure why Livy uses a plural here. Possibly it's a kind of old-fashioned thing where liberi means sort of offspring, where it kind of could be interpreted as plural or singular, but it's a bit of a mystery. Possibly Livy had read a source which suggested other children, and so he made it plural. We don't really know. Okay, so moving on to the next sentence. De sponderat, he had promised, or he had betrothed, pluperfect tense, he had betrothed his daughter, filiam, to Lucio Isilio Tribunicio, literally to the tribunician Lucius Isilius. Now, tribunicio in this context means an ex-tribune, someone who has held the office of tribune before. And this is a man called Lucius Isilius. Now, tribune means an ancient Roman official who was chosen by the plebeians, the poor, to protect their interests. So Lucius Isilius is a kind of popular hero. He's not part of the aristocracy. He's a representative of the common people, so the plebs, to use the Latin term. So he, the dad, had betrothed his daughter to the ex-tribune Lucius Isilius, and we now hear about him. He is a viro acri, an energetic or fierce man, and a man expertae virtutes, of proven courage, genitive case. Expertus in this context means something that's been tried and tested, right? So of proven courage for the cause, pro causa, of the plebs, of the common people. So plebis is the genitive case of plebs. So for the cause of the common people. So Livy has set up this very rosy picture, very positive picture of the girl and her dad and her fiancé. And now, of course, we're going to hear about the villain, which is Appius Claudius. So let's go on then. So the subject in this next sentence, this is the top of page 4, the subject is Appius. Okay? And this is who he is. He is Appius Claudius Crassus, or just Appius Claudius. He was a member of the first Board of 10, the first Decemvirate in 451, and now also a member of the second one in 450. Okay, so that's who we're talking about. Appius, and he's described as armanes, out of his mind, or crazed, with love, amore, ablative of amor. Right, so Appius, crazed with love, having tried. Now, ad orior is a verb meaning to try, and here it's a deponent verb. Here you have the perfect participle. Having tried to perlicere, to seduce this, and then the object is here, hanc virginem, this maiden. Having tried to seduce this maiden, and then she's described as adultam, which means, mature, grown up, and also she is forma excellentem, she is excelling in beauty. So excellentem means excelling, and forma is the ablative of forma, meaning beauty. So she's excelling in beauty, right? So having tried to seduce her with pretio, with a price, i.e. with money, and with spe, with hope. So we might translate spe as promises, something like that. So having tried to seduce her with money and promises, after he noticed, postquam anima advertit, after he noticed, and then we go into indirect statement, after he noticed that everything, omnia, and then here we have to imagine a word like esse, a verb. After he noticed that everything was saipta, that means defended or protected or guarded. After he noticed that everything was guarded by pudore, by modesty, that's the ablative of pudor. So after he noticed that everything was guarded by modesty, in other words, he couldn't persuade her to have an affair with him because she knew that, she was engaged and that would be wrong. So after he noticed that, he convertit animum, he turned his mind towards, cruel, crudelem, and arrogant, superbamque, violence, vim. Right? The violence is cruel because it's violence against an innocent woman. It's also arrogant, perhaps because he thinks he can get away with it. He thinks he's above the law, and we'll later see that that's not the case. So, yes, he turned his mind towards cruel and arrogant violence. So, vim is the accusative of vis, which means physical force or violence. And let's see what plan he comes up with. So, he gave the task, negotium, the job, he gave the task to his client, clienti, dative of cliens. A client is just someone who, not someone who works for him formally, but a client is someone who, Appius Claudius will, help Marcus advance his career, and in exchange, Marcus, the client, will do favors for Appius. He'll help Appius out. So it's a kind of give and take relationship. So he gave the job to his client, Marcus Claudius, And then let's see what the job is. The job is to, the job is to ad sereret, to claim, and the object is virginem, to claim the maiden, in servitutem, into slavery. Now, if you claim someone into slavery, that means that you claim that they are your slave. So he's asking his client to make the claim that this woman is actually, this woman Virginia is actually not a free woman, but Marcus's slave. And this is very cunning, because Marcus can say, this woman is my slave. Appius, as the judge, can say, yes, that's correct, she is your slave. And then once Virginia is a slave, Appius will be able to do what he wants to her because she will have no rights. That's the point. So he gave to his client Marcus Claudius the job to claim the maiden into servitude, or to claim the maiden as his slave, and not, neque, and not to yield, cederet, and not to concede anything, to the people demanding, postulantibus, that's the dative plural of the participle, to the people demanding. And then we get a legal term, vindicias secundum libertatem. That means literally, I've put it in inverted commas because it's a legal term, rights in accordance with liberty. Secundum, in accordance with freedom. So in other words, when Virginia's friends say, hang on, we know that she's actually a free woman, Marcus Claudius is not to give in to them. He should insist that she is actually his slave. Okay, so that is Appius's plan. Why has Appius chosen this particular moment? Well, we find out. Ratus, literally having thought, perfect participle from reor, to think, right? Having thought that it was esse. So we're now in indirect statement, having thought that it was a locum, literally a place, but we could say an opportunity, for injustice, injuriae, for injustice, a place for injustice, an opportunity for injustice. Why? Quod pater puellae, because the father of the girl was away, abesset. So while the dad is away on campaign, he can do something unjust. And this is an injustice. This is actually something against the law, pretty much, because in the Roman law, which Appius himself had helped to make, there was a presumption of innocence. In other words, if someone's freedom is in question, this person should be presumed free until the court decides that they're actually a slave. So what Appius is doing is going to be either a grey area or illegal. And that's why he needs to push it through while the father is away. Okay, and then we get an ablative absolute. Virgini venienti, with the maiden coming in forum, into the forum. And then we find out why she's coming into the forum. Namque, for there, ibi, in the forum, for there were erant the ludi literarum, the schools of letters, in tabernaculis, in tents, right? So why was Virginia going to the forum? Because that was where her school was. Now, this is Livy being a bit unhistorical or anachronistic, because actually there were no schools in Rome at that time. The first school in Rome was something like 234 BC. Until then, everyone was educated at home. So it's not true it's not true that she would have been going to school. But the point is, I guess Livy wants some excuse. Livy wants a reason why why Virginia would be in the forum. And so he's going to say that she was going to school. And she was going to go to a ludus literarum, a school of letters, which is where you go to learn literacy and things, kind of like elementary school today. So, yes, as the maiden was coming into the forum, for there, in tents, were the schools of letters, what happened? The minister, the helper of the lust of the decemvir, the libidinis decemviri, so you've got two genitives there, the helper of the lust of the decemvir. And again, notice Livy is placing blame on the lust rather than the man. So that the helper of the lust of the decemvir, that helper, of course, is the client Marcus Claudius. The helper injecit manum, he applied his hand. In other words, he put his hand on the girl. And this is a kind of legal thing, right? By putting his hand on her, he is claiming her. He is saying, you need to come with me to court, basically. So he put his hand on her, calling her, appellans, present participle, calling her a natam, someone born from his slave, servatua, ablative, someone born from his slave, and a slave. Right, so he's calling her both the daughter of one of his slaves and therefore a slave. Right? Because her mum is a slave, she is a slave as well. Right? That's what he's calling her. And he was ordering her, ubebat, he was ordering her, or because it's imperfect, you could say he kept ordering her to follow, sequi, infinitive of sequor, I follow, he ordered her to follow him, say. So he says, look, you're a slave girl, so you have to come with me. Okay. And then we have to imagine a verb like he said that, right? He said that abstractorum, that he would abtraho, to drag away. So he said that he would drag her away by force, that's the ablative of vis, he would drag her away by force, cunctantem, that means hesitating. So her hesitating, or her delaying, he would drag away by force. Now in English we would do this with a conditional. If she delayed, if she hesitated, then he would drag her away by force. Okay, so we'll stop there and then in another video look at the next bit of text. And do let me know if there's anything in those first 2 pages of Latin that you want to ask about.